Hello and welcome to the Problem Gambling Podcast. I'm Barry Grant, an addiction counselor with Extern Problem Gambling, and my co-host is Claire Donegan, an expert by lived experience and the project lead of Empower Her Recovery Network, also part of Extern Problem Gambling, and back with a bang. And in fairness to him, he just made it back, having watched Liverpool win the league in style yesterday, and he still made it back in time to, to do the
Just
podcast
about.
recording today. Mr. Tony O'Reilly, obviously the original co-host of the show and longtime friend of the project, and he is mostly, Tony, you're mostly doing the school talks at the moment. You do a bit of counselling as well, but it's mostly the school talks and corporate talks. Or what have you mostly been up to the last couple of years?
Mostly school talks. I would have visited, I think over the last 2 years now, we're hitting towards 275, 80 schools and seeing nearly over 25,000 students. I didn't think we'd hit the same figures this year again, but it looks like we're going to hit the same figures. So it's yeah, that's mainly because I'm on the road, as you can see, in a hotel. And many of my clients, when I am doing a bit of client work, will see different backgrounds every time they're on. So it's yeah, the majority of the work is the school talks and small little bit of corporate stuff. GA clubs are starting to contact as well, based on a few talks I did down in Cork. Kind of pulling back on the counselling. So I know that I would have a booking page in my private site, but that's I'm not seeing as many clients because just basically time wise and self care wise. But the schools are something I enjoy. I'm in Gorey on Wednesday this week. Now that should be interesting. Back to where it all kind of happened. So we're seeing nearly 500 students there on Wednesday. So yeah, it's been good. It's been busy. Yeah, so it's a while since we've done this, and you coerced me into doing it before I knew I was going to the match. Um, so it's all good though.
Yeah, for people who don't know and who haven't read Tony's book, I highly recommend it. Tony 10. Tony was the former post office manager in Corey County, Wexford, and then some really interesting stuff happened. I'm not going to spoil it for you, just go read the book instead. And Tony was talking about we there. We are going to do 20 or have done 25,000 students. That Tony is a one-man band, so he's doing all this. He
Did I
has
say
no
we? Did
help.
I?
He is now, well, you and the car. I think the car
Yeah,
has become part of you at this stage. You're basically a married
it
couple.
surely has.
But the reason we're doing this special podcast today, we're cheating and recording it a little bit ahead of time. But on May 13th, when we're going to release this, 2025, is the fifth anniversary of the first one of these podcasts that we recorded. And I don't know what inspired us to record the first one in the first place. I don't know if you remember. I think
I do.
so. May 2020, the first lockdowns were March 2020, around St. Patrick's Day for people who live outside of Ireland. So it was around 17th of March.
Mm.
So we're into the lockdowns. I think we had a lull then for a bit before it went completely bananas, and then we were flat to the mat. Once people realized that the lockdowns were actually going to be going on for more than 2 weeks,
Mm.
3 weeks, that there was going to be kind of a medium to long term thing. But we had a kind of a weird lull period there where we had a little bit of time in our hands, which is unusual. Was that, or do you remember why we did
Yeah,
it?
like we had just we'd started to work in Dublin, so you were doing 2 days, I was doing 2 days, and we had the office in Waterford as well, so we were doing a lot more face to face. And when lockdown kicked in, obviously that stopped, so we were kind of getting back to working online, I suppose. And we did have a bit of kind of free time, and we were kind of felt we'd like to kind of maybe do something that probably like a lot of people back then decided to do podcasts just to try connect and reach out to people on a different platform to try try get I suppose help people and support people, probably just to find our own existence within the project as well, making sure we're filling up our hours too. I don't know whether I'm supposed to say that out on the camera, but that's what no, it was really good. Like, and again, like I know we recorded a lot of episodes, and I know I was very vocal about kind of going on, not this again, but generally, I suppose we enjoyed doing a good few of the episodes. It was good. It was enjoyable. It's great to see it back going again as well.
Yeah, I
Ah,
think this is going to be number 78 when it goes out, which is amazing because I never thought we'd get more than five or six out of them when we started. Sorry, Claire, you were going to say something.
I was just gonna say your replacement co-host now can't live up to you now, Tony, but I'm doing my best. But you know what? It's like you're saying, okay, we didn't know what effect this podcast would have, but for me, I like started my recovery journey around March 2020. So this was my saving grace. Like I would wait every week for the next episode because it had such a big impact on my life at that time. So I mean, I'm privileged to be here and to be able to like actually be part of it now, but it's crazy the journey that I've had with this podcast because you know, 3 years of listening intently, then becoming a guest, and then a year later becoming the co-host. So, yeah, I just think it's interesting. But like you say, it's really great that, you know, it's 5 years on and it's still going strong. And I think that's the fact that there is no other Irish platform that really talks about this. Well, there might be one or two popping up now, but this has been consistent the whole way through. It's been like a friend to people. And they still like everyone, like every client I've had has told me they listen. So we're doing something right.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big ones for me in the beginning was when you had to hear back from people. And it could be clients that you're already working with or new people ringing the helpline, which I think was the biggest one for me. Because getting people to ring the helpline is notoriously difficult. You know, it's about maybe 1% of people who ever go to the website, pick up the phone or send us an email. And even early doors, you could see a lot of people saying or writing, "Oh, I heard the podcast, and that was the thing that got them to make contact." Because yeah, a website is a website, and it's just words and pictures. Whereas when you hear a human voice on your listening on your headphones or on your speaker, you kind of go, "Okay, well, like kind of," you feel like you start to know the person a bit, and then you realize, okay, well, they're whatever opinions that they form about the person. But most people are horribly scared of things like counselors and psychotherapists. Are probably up there with dentists in terms of people that you don't want to go to. So like maybe that helped a bit as well. And great guests. Like we've had so many amazing guests as well who talked about their own lived experience, normalized the whole thing. Like because one of the recurring themes that I've seen working with people for nearly 10 years now in the gambling space is a lot of people don't want to go to meetings. So if you don't go to meetings, how do you find out that there are millions of people around the world who think in very similar ways to you and behave in very similar ways to you? You don't, right? You don't, unless you're listening. Well, obviously, we're not the only podcast in the gambling space, but that's one of the advantages of podcasts is you hear guest after guest after guest after guest saying very, very similar things about the way that they thought and the things that they believed and the behaviors that they engaged in. Or is that, am I talking out my hoop here
No,
now?
no, because I think people feel it's a bit like when you do go to a meeting at the start, you feel like you're not mad, you feel like you're connected in some shape or form. And podcasts can do that. Like I know it's things I don't listen to a whole lot. I think I've said that to you numerous times. Like I generally listen to audiobooks when I'm driving, because I want to try escape away from kind of work kind of stuff. But a lot of people connect to it and get something from it. So like some of the ones that some clients would have said were the best ones were the ones that we just kind of decided just beforehand what we're going to talk about. Say when we didn't have guests, we had some brilliant guests on it. But some of the weeks when we didn't have guests, we wanted to kind of try pick apart various aspects of gambling and gambling addiction. I think where a lot of people will get so much from listening to other people sharing their testimonies. I think a lot of people did get something from our ramblings around um various aspects of gambling, like change your thinking. Especially like the episode where we've done the alternative view to GA, like because I think it is important to kind of pull apart what that means for different people. I really enjoyed some of those episodes. So yeah, it's like some of my friends listen to the podcast and like they wouldn't have a gambling problem, but they still found it interesting to learn more about it. And it's for everyone. And I know a lot of family members who contact me now, even 2 or 3 years on from me doing the probably last one. It's still a place where I would say, go have a listen to this episode or that episode. You might get a sense, we'll say, from Steve from GamFam about the family member's point of view, or you might get some particular episode might just give them a little bit more understanding, like, maybe time, access, money, or different aspects of different things. So I think it was really, really good. That I can't believe we've done so many episodes, because it's such a niche kind of subject as well. To get 78 episodes is kind of quite impressive, because we didn't really branch out of any other area of it, really. So it's kind of quite impressive to get that many. And to get, especially Claire, getting all the new guests on for this series. I know you probably had a bit in that too, that as well, Barry, but
No.
no, but to get all the new guests and just keep it kind of as fresh. But I know we were talking beforehand about some of the episodes that kind of hit us, and I was just thinking about there where we were speaking, rather than just kind of backslapping each other saying how great the podcast is. It would be good to kind of the one there's a couple I was a bit starstruck when we had Rory Stories on. I just read his book, and I took the lead on that one. And I was very starstruck when Rory, because I think he does amazing work in the mental health. But the one that really hit me, and it kind of was when we had Charles and Liz Ritchie on, when they spoke, I suppose, as much about the suicides part of their journey, like how their son Jack had taken his own life because of gambling. But I think also about the family bit. I know when I watched Brian Penny's documentary during the week, when I watched the second episode around the family side of it, it really impacted me in different ways I didn't think it would. So I think me in my recovery, I'm sure many people listening will agree that the stigma and shame and guilt and all these different mixed match of feelings can come back up when you connect how it impacted other people. And when you hear two people coming on and sharing, that horrendous story about how their son took his own life from something that's supposed to be fun and exciting. That really kind of hit home. That's one that kind of stands out for me. I love the one with Usher McConnell as well, right? I hopped off in the middle of it. I went on to do an interview with, I think it was on the last word, and come back on again. So there's been a couple of mad ones in there as well. But I think that's the one that really kind of really hits me. The first couple as well were kind of, I know it's not with my own story on it. I'm probably sick of telling it at this stage, but they were kind of good as well. So
Yeah, yeah, no, I loved all of those. I mean, well, it's hard to say love with the Charles and Liz Ritchie one because it's such a difficult topic, and it's probably every parent's worst nightmare is to lose their child. And for anybody who hasn't seen that Brian Penny documentary, if you're outside of Ireland, sorry, because it's going to be geo blocked by our national broadcaster, but it's called Hooked. Well worth a watch. The first episode looks at gambling and kind of smartphone social media addiction as well. But in that episode, he interviews Pete and Sadie Keogh, who are also from Gambling with Lives, who lost their son Lewis to suicide, and that is one of those heartbreaking things I've ever seen. And I've met them numerous times, and I've heard them tell their story numerous times, but it still gets me. And Sadie, in that interview on Hooked, talks about she knew nothing about gambling. So after the death of her son Lewis, and after reading his suicide note, which referenced the hell he was going through with gambling, she started Googling gambling stuff to learn about gambling, and how it could be addictive, and just learn more about it. And she said she started getting, and she wasn't opening any gambling, accounts. She wasn't opening accounts with any gambling companies. Just Googling it. And she was getting, within days, free bet offers. She said by the end of the week, she had like a free bet offer for £1,500. And this is a middle-aged woman who just lost her son through a gambling-related suicide, right? But anyway, it's one of the most hard-hitting things I think you could possibly see. Claire, I mean, is there anything that stands out from you? For you, I mean, I suppose in the beginning, like that, you were listening to the podcast and looking forward to it and getting something out of it. Was there any interviews or discussions that jumped out at you?
Yeah, like I like what you were saying, Tony, and I was talking to Barry about this earlier. I really liked when you deconstructed the 12 steps. That stands out to me. I remember that, and it's something because, like we all know, GA doesn't work for everyone, and it's kind of nice to hear different views on that, I think. And it didn't work for me at the start either. I do remember Jana Melixon. I think that's how you say her name. Is she Finnish? Is
She's
that
from
right?
Finland, yeah. Jana, like I always got her surname wrong. Michaela, I think, or Mekela or something like that. Finnish is a
Oh,
really difficult language.
apologies
Jana,
to her
anyway,
if I'm getting that
Jenna,
wrong.
if you're looking for that one. Yeah, she's brilliant. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, that stood out to me, but I don't know if that's the first female you would have recorded on the podcast. I feel like it is. But I
Mm.
really like that because she was so raw and honest, and definitely helped me to feel less bad about myself and my addiction. So I really like that one. I'm going to be a little bit biased. So the last one we released for me is I really love that Richie Paxton. What a hero because he just blew my mind. Not saying anything I didn't already understand, but it's just he had a way with words, and he's talking about like say for things like GA. It's something that didn't work for me at the start, but it's something that I understand a lot more now, 5 years on in my recovery. Like I can take elements of it and go, okay, I can see that now. I can see where this fits in my journey where it didn't before. And he talks about that kind of thing, that thing that it didn't work for you at the time, but it can work for you now. So I would really say that one. I mean, I loved all of them. I think what was it was always great to have an Irish guest on though. That did help because this is something that we were talking about even earlier. We are talking about that whole normality of the society around you where it's not strange for us that we walk down the street and see the bookies beside the pub. And that is normal, but it's not everywhere, as you say, and there is this societal expectation or acceptance that not every country has, and not every society would have, and we don't see that because we've grown up in Ireland where it's totally normalized. So I do find there's that bit of comfort, and I'm sure I'm not the only one from having those Irish guests on, because it is a novelty, but it's also very difficult to get them, as you know.
Yeah, we've had some. I was scrolling through just the episodes over the course of the day, and there's so many people in there. Like there was Darren Skelton, who's a guy from Waterford. He's a journalist. I think he'd actually worked for one of the betting companies back in the day. And his anytime I've ever checked the stats on which episodes are doing well, his one is always somewhere in the top five. It just really resonates with people. I've met him a few times over the years. Really nice guy, and he really kind of describes his own situation well, and he'd be one of those people who, and there's a lot of them out there who, because they had some kind of work or connections with the industry during their lives, they felt that they had some sort of an edge that gave them, an increased chance of winning. He talks really kind of eloquently about that. And then there's another guy from Waterford, a former neighbour of mine, Pat, who came on and talked about his time working in betting shops and how the culture kind of changed over the years. And even, I think he's describing a scene in the episode where there's a guy that's in the betting shop every day, and the partner is coming in trying to drag him out before he blows all the wages or the social welfare money, and you're going like, how many betting office Jesus, I'm forgetting how to speak English here. How many betting office staff members have had to see things like that over the years? Do you know what I mean? And try and kind of numb themselves to it, because look, I mean, you guys have spent more time in betting offices than I certainly ever have. I've met plenty of people who work in betting offices and in different kind of parts of the gambling industry, but they're on the front line. They tend to be just common or garden decent people who are just in there doing a job. They don't wish any kind of badness on people. That, certainly the vast majority of them, from what I can tell. So, like, what does that do to you when you have to work in that kind of environment, or the casinos as well, where you can see the same sorts of things happening? So, I thought that was a really interesting insight. And Owen Collins, who we had on recently from Cork, he was just really loved the way he spoke, and I suppose he's relatively, compared to some of the other guests, relatively recently in recovery, but he spoke really kind of powerfully about his own experience and that thing of, so some parallels with Tony's situation where there was fraud, and then there was, um, fortunately, Owen didn't have to go to prison, but he was they had to go through the courts and probation act and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, a lot of great ones. And Megan, you're gonna have to remember, is it Vanderson?
Vanderson. That
Yeah,
was incredible.
I think we just hit record, and I asked her just to tell us a little bit about how she started gambling, and she spoke nonstop for like 20 minutes, just perfectly. Now there's so few people that you can get to do that. She just bang, hit record, go, and she just kind of gave this kind of really eloquent description over experience. That was amazing as well. Anyone else? Claire?
I think that was 35 minutes she spoke for
Was it? My
uninterrupted.
God, that's amazing.
But now she does do it for a living as well. So
Yeah, sure.
there's that element of it. No, Megan was brilliant. And I did enjoy listening to her because she's so young as well. Like she's only about 21, 22, and she's not that long in recovery either. And to be able to speak about it in the way that she did, I thought was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, Christina, I did like as well. It's always great to hear her. She's so seasoned from the Broke Girls Society. I think she, you get those different perspectives from having, like, she's in America. It's all very different over there. It's only kind of starting, which I find very hard to believe how bad it is over there. But apparently it really is. So yeah, I don't know. Tony, any thoughts? Who stands
Suppose when you
out for
talk
you?
about the women who shared the story, like Lisa Walker is always one I really
Mm.
enjoyed the chat we had with Lisa, like the scene where she describes gambling in Las Vegas in her wedding dress, like leaving the wedding, like that's. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Lisa afterwards, and at the conference we were at there in London, and she's just an amazing advocate for women in recovery as well. I know a lot of people have kind of gone to do their own work based on being inspired by Lisa, and she speaks brilliantly. So that, yeah, that's another. I remember listening to her story, kind of going like I have my own experience of wedding day stories, but wow, like just being in a casino in the middle of Las Vegas in your wedding dress, like kind of nearly tops everything. It's just it's an unbelievable visual
Mm.
of where gambling can bring you, that in that one of the biggest moments of your life. You can't even stay in your own, I suppose, your own mind, but also stay in the zone of what a wedding should be like, connecting with loved ones and sharing time with loved ones and sneaking off to go to I don't know, my stag party. All right, I snuck off to Paddy Power for the night. The lads had to come looking for me. But that's when I was trying to win back money. But it's absolutely, yeah. So like, I take what you're saying, Claire. It's great to have the kind of a mix of guests on, because you have to have a mix of guests of female and male, and to give different outlooks and different the different stories will resonate differently with different people. I think that's so important. I think I'll be honest, I haven't listened back to a whole lot of them. I never listen back to podcasts that I do or record it. I've listened to a couple. I'm getting better at it. But I definitely will start listening back, especially Richie and Megan. I'll probably try listening back and see what you're saying. And again, that's why it's good to have the chat about today, because it does remind you of, um, I suppose, how important it is to stay connected in recovery. And again, um, in GA they'll say, like, many meetings, many chances, few meetings, few chances, no meetings, no chances. But I suppose for me, the biggest part of any recovery is connection. And if you can connect to something, whether that's listening to someone speaking on a podcast, or someone speaking in a meeting, or someone sitting across from you in a one-to-one space, in a counseling space, if you can do that, I think you're definitely in the right road to recovery. And that's why I think the podcasts are so important around it. Um, and there's lots of them around mental health, but it's great to have one specifically for gambling, which is great. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Because sometimes people like to kind of throw out, we did 3 episodes on the 12 steps and we broke them down. Now I have to put my hand up and say, I know very, very, very little about the 12-step approach, although I do try and set aside some time to learn more about it. And I think there's a huge amount of value in it, and it helps a huge amount of people around the world in its various different forms. But like that, that is a great piece of wisdom. Many meetings, many chances. I mean, no meetings, no chances. Like, what what work are you putting into your recovery? If the answer is zero, then you're probably going to be looking at a relapse. Like,
Yeah.
and it could be it could be GA meetings, it could be smart recovery meetings, it could be your aftercare. Well, your aftercare from residential is probably going to be a form of a 12-step meeting, or something else, or one-to-ones, or whatever way you maintain your recovery. But if you're not regularly maintaining it, you're over time you're reducing the chance of your recovery and increasing the chance of your relapse. Like, um, yeah, the 12 step actually, I think we were doing them as well. You had Russell Brand. I know he's a kind of a
We won't
toxic,
mention him. No.
that's a toxic character
Yeah. May
at the
delete those
moment,
episodes now.
but he has a book anyway
Yeah.
that looks at, and he's a big advocate for the 12 step approach. But you know, some of the language, I think it's the original big book of AA might be 90 years
It's
old
something
this
like the
year.
20s. You see, you have to think of it
Mm.
like the 12 steps. Okay, yes, it works for a lot of people, but it was designed for alcoholics, right? So
Alcoholic
you're
men.
taking
Alcoholic men.
alcoholic men. There you go, friend of Bill.
Right.
So like that was about 100 years ago, created for something that wasn't gambling. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And it's just been applied to it. And there is lots and lots of wisdom in it. I think what's interesting though, I never hear anyone talk about smart recovery, even though it's quite a big thing. I've never met anyone who's done it that specifically. But what the podcast has helped me with anyway over the years, and I suppose I did want to get into working in this space, and I am working in this space, but I've gained a lot of knowledge of what is actually out there as well. Like, you having guests on, like you say, you mentioned Steve from GamFam, or there's all these other ones. You've had people on from Quinmera. It's good to know that there are all these other services as well, or these other organizations. And I wouldn't know a lot of that if you hadn't had those guests on and if you hadn't mentioned it or talked about it. So I think that's what has been great about it as well. There's no preciousness in this podcast. It's really like, here's the information you need to know, and we're giving it to you. Do what you want with it.
Yeah, I think myself and Tony probably discuss. I don't know how much discussion we put into it, but I think there's always an understanding between all of us, really, all three of us, that we didn't want to get into this thing that you see in some other countries where those people in that project are funded by such and such a type of funding, therefore they are bad people, therefore we're not going to have any dealings with them. Or I'm talking largely about the UK here, where unfortunately there's a bit of that stuff goes on, and it can get a bit toxic online. I think early doors we said, look, we're going to talk to everybody, regardless of what their funding model is, regardless of what the relationship with the industry is. We'll just talk to everybody in the space, because lots of people are doing great work in the space. I have my strong views on where the funding ideally should come from for these types of services. Tony will be more kind of, well, I don't want to speak for Tony, but like Tony's views wouldn't be exactly aligned with mine, which is a good thing. That's healthy. And I think we tried to do it that way. And that means that you get to hear it from a lot of different voices and a lot of different perspectives. And, even the most recent episode, uh, let's say with Richie, Paxton, that's, I've heard so many good things about Epic Restart from so many different people over the years. It's kind of immaterial to me, and I'm sure it's immaterial to the people who go on that program where the money comes from. At the end of the day, there's people doing amazing work with really good intentions. So, is that what you were talking about, or am I filtering it through my own junk there?
You went a little bit off track, but yeah. I'm just saying, like, because I wanted to get as much information as I could. And I find that with, I'd say nearly all my clients, like, they all want to know as much as they can about this, about what's going on in their brain is one thing, but also the whole landscape. They're actually just get in and they're really interested in all of it. And this podcast has allowed that to happen for a lot of them, and definitely for me to know what's going on. Like, I'll be honest, okay, I'm very much in it now, but would I have had a clue about regulation before listening to this podcast? I mean, you've done quite a lot on that as well, but that's something we should know about. I mean, I know you did an episode, you had about 4 different TDs on, and I found that one really interesting. And that would have been before the regulation was passed. Most of them would have been before the regulation was passed, but I was able to follow that. I was able to go out and find information and read all of that and understand it myself. Now, not everyone's going to be a big nerd like me or you, Barry.
I'm definitely not anyway.
But no. Um, but the choice was there and the information was there. And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a massive information sharing on this platform, which allows us to know where we are if we want to in Ireland. Because if you go searching a lot of the time, you're going to find something that's totally irrelevant to you in Ireland. So that's what I've definitely got from it over the years.
I think a
Yeah.
smart, sorry, Barry, I think
Sorry.
a smart recovery should be a guess for your future, because I think it's a really good module, and like anyone's in recovery, their workbook is excellent for
Mm.
resources. It's really I use it a lot with clients as well. It's really, really good. And it's really easy to follow, and it's really easy to apply to your own life as well. Yeah, I think it is important to look at all different modalities of recovery, because we can get caught up on, one size doesn't fit all. And I have my own experiences, even I think from pulling apart a 12-step program. I probably create a lot of animosity, I suppose, with a few people towards my views, or my kind of outlook on what recovery is, my own recovery as well. And like, recovery is recovery, and I think regardless where money comes from, regardless of how you do it, I think it's so important, that connection piece. And again, if people connect to the regulating part, people connect with listen to family members, connect with people, listen to people from the UK or Ireland or wherever it might be. I think the most important thing is that there's information out there that's clear, some what people are talking about and people are listening. I think that's where podcasts come in and are, something that are a really good tool to to help people. And I think that's one of a few good things came out of the pandemic. Working online is one of them. For someone like myself who's on the road a good bit, but also the ability to connect differently with people, I think, and get that information that's out there. It's so important.
Yeah, and like that, I mean, for the people who can't get to meetings, or maybe they would struggle to go for counseling or, residential treatment, whatever sort of treatment. If you're getting something from these podcasts, if you're learning something useful, even if it's just some practical tip about sticking a piece of blocking software in your phone, or actually learned something from a client today about the gambling blocks that AIB and Revolut operate in Ireland, that I'm not going to share on the podcast until I fully confirm. But there's some problems there. So like, you're learning stuff all the time. And even when I was checking, so the most downloaded ones there, one of the most downloaded ones was a podcast that we did. It was probably another one of these ones that we pulled out of our, 5 minutes before we started recording. But it was on negative core beliefs, and some of the negative core beliefs that would drive gambling, or just, put a person in a place where they're feeling anxious or stressed or depressed, and then that could be a trigger to gambling. So, there's definitely an interest there where people want to learn more about what makes them tick. What makes the average person tick, whether you gamble or you don't gamble, whether you're a family member or somebody who's in recovery or in active addiction, and to kind of get the help that you need in whatever format that it comes in, and maintain in whatever way that suits you in terms of maintaining. Yeah, I would agree with you about smart recovery. I did the facilitator training a good few years ago now, and not long after I came to Ireland first, although I've never facilitated a group in it. But I suppose one of the things as I'm trying to learn more about the 12-step approach is that idea of um, what I like or what I find interesting about the 12-step approach is this idea that they talk about it being a we program rather than an I program. And there's a lot of references into uh, the limitations of just relying on yourself. I think there's something in the big book I was looking at the other day uh, from AA. It said we will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. And for me as a counselor, that was a real slap in the face because, of course, counseling is all about getting to know yourself better, right? But I think, for the people who founded AA, they'd been through lots of, I suppose, what were modern treatments at the time, maybe psychoanalysis and other types of early talk therapies, plus, medical interventions and, drying out in sanatoriums and all these sort of things. But I think, where smart recovery comes from that kind of CBT, REBT, kind of self-knowledge focus. I think there's a limitation there where, as an atheist, I struggle with the whole higher power idea. But I heard somebody talking about it the other day that if you're not relying on a higher power, you have to rely on a lower power, and the lower power that we generally rely on is this fucked up shit show between our ears, which got us into trouble in the first place.
Mm.
So, having said that, you can always work on improving the thing that's going on between your ears.
Yeah, I suppose just add that to what you're saying about the we and the I. I think it's important to have a balance of both. Like when you do the emotional regulation work with clients, it's about recognizing your self-regulation and your relational regulation and how it went to use them. And not to go into psychobabble, but a lot of people, and myself included, will talk about attachment having a big part of or unhealthy attachment in early childhood will have a big part of the journey into addiction. So then it's about learning how to re-regulate or self-regulate or emotionally regulate within people instead of with a substance or behavior or whatever. And I've talked numerous times about the shopping element in lots of the podcasts to start, which is an unhealthy regulation thing that I still use a lot. So I think the eye, like even you're saying, like not to rely on the thing between our ears, but I think sometimes we need to because we mightn't have the ability to relational regulate in that moment or have that higher power. But I think it's important to like talk about higher power. Like I remember, I won't share exactly what my thoughts are on it. You'll probably get the gist of it. But when I was in Canberra, they talked about like everyone's going on trying to find a higher power. It's like you have to find it. Like no one can find it. I was just thinking you have to find it to get full recovery. You can probably guess where my analogy I use with it, about trying to find something else. So I think how I kind of connected to that, I suppose, it was a couple of years after my mom passed. It would have been I was at the grave in Carlo, and I got this overwhelming feeling of I don't know what serenity probably wrong. I suppose what emotion would have been the word, and I suppose I connected to the strength that she showed in her final days in her own cancer battle cancer. Like she, for the last 8 or 9 weeks of her life, when she found out that it was terminal to when she passed away, there was a huge strength there. And I suppose I probably never really fully connected to the strength I probably showed in my own recovery. It's something maybe that should kind of dismiss of us, or, you know, as sometimes we're afraid to kind of say, yeah, I actually done well, or uh, I was strong with what I had to face and hold myself together. I think when I was standing in that graveyard, I was kind of bit kind of mad as well. The sun came out through the clouds in the same moment, so I don't know. But in that moment, there was that connection I felt. Whereas before, I didn't feel. I wouldn't say I never felt a connection with my mom, but I think it was just it kind of. Oh, that's what a higher power could be. That maybe that you didn't know was there. And I'm talking about 10 years probably in recovery at the stage, or 8 or 9 years, whatever it might be. Well, I think a lot of time in Convert was a lot of emphasis about trying to find your higher power, and people are going around looking at the bushes or looking everywhere for it. But I think it's so important, like that it's about connecting to something, and that could be, as we go back to the very start, connecting with Liverpool Football Club or Man United or wherever else. Some people get their higher power, but that connection to feel by being a part of something that's bigger than themselves, because the values of each club might align to your own values or your connection through whatever. And that could be connecting through a dad who was a fan, or an uncle who was a fan, or a friend who was a fan. So I think it's so important with the higher power thing. Like it's not a lot of times it's seen as that religious aspect of it has to be God or Bible or whatever else it might be, but can be absolutely anything. And I think that's where I kind of just nodded to myself going over the graveyard. I kind of, oh yeah, well, that's what could be, and that's my understanding of what it is. So, um,
But
you know,
that's your understanding, Tony, after years of recovery and working on yourself, right? And I was turned off at the very start by
mm.
GA because of those words, higher power. I couldn't connect to it. I couldn't understand, but I couldn't understand it. Like, and the thing is, you have to understand, not everyone's working in this field like we are every day. We're not, like, it made no sense to me at the
Yes,
time, a higher power.
yes, but then just to reiterate what we're saying, is but like if back when I was in recovery, there wasn't these podcasts, there wasn't people talking about gambling. As I always say, I was going around trying to find Oisin's book before I went to Convert to get all the answers. But it wasn't that, and I think now, so like I suppose I was probably late to the game in it all, like because when I read Brian Penny's book, Bonus Time, I only realized then, geez, I suffered from anxiety when I was younger, and it was probably, and I connected some of his stories. So I think the more we listen to stories, the more we find those connections. And I suppose as a person, I'm probably closed off to that because I would have boxed away a lot of stuff around loss, around grief, or also around recovery as well, because you're trying to get your life back on track. But if we can open ourselves up to different ideologies around podcasts, around different things, because like Brian talked about certain aspects in his book, and I go, geez, yeah, that's me. And like maybe I didn't want to admit I was anxious. And maybe the stigma has been broken down around anxiety or depression or other stuff over the last number of years, but we are more open to say we have that. Like if you look at even ADHD now, it's been talked a lot around with gambling. And a couple of years ago, I think my partner said to me, she said you've touches of ADHD. So I don't want to have ADHD. But nowadays it's nearly seen as it's more accepted if someone gets diagnosed, and I think that's where the understanding and or the one thing I will say, like, when I was in GA meetings at the very start. And again, I always say I'm not anti-GA, but I remember there was a turning point that I said maybe I need more than this, or not more, something different. When I read the Red Book, and it said, like, I was only reading it the other night as well, is knowing why we gambled important. And the Red Book, if anyone doesn't know, it's that kind of questions and answers. And it's they just to paraphrase, like of all the members that we asked, none, or any of the members who had psychiatric help or whatever support, none have found to be a benefit to find out why they gambled. I found it a benefit to find out why I gambled, because it's anxiety, low self-esteem, um, attachments, insecurities, and I've been able to work on them and recognize then through that emotional regulation piece when that's coming back at me. And I've had to deal with a couple of those moments over the last couple of weeks, last week, I suppose, an instance which I won't go into today. I'll share with you again. But also, even going to Liverpool, the high of winning the league, the high of going over, going down to buy runners and jeans where I didn't even need, because you're on that high going over. So I think, just to kind of come back to what I was saying, like, the more we read and the more we listen to about gambling, the more we can make those connections, I think, a little bit quicker than I did. You don't necessarily have to do all the work on yourself, like, going to Convera or doing work as a counselor. I think it's just there's so much more out there, and that kind of echoes what we've been saying throughout the whole podcast, saying, like, there's more out there now. There's more literature, there's more research, there's more podcasts, and I think that's where people find the connections. So I think that's an important point to make with it.
No, that's yeah, basically the same. I would
Mm,
say sometimes I feel this Neanderthal mindset or something that I would have had in my addiction that I just didn't understand. Like that's what I'm saying. When I went into GA, I suppose I didn't go to a residential unit. I just went to the actual meetings, but the higher power turned me off. But what I would say is I understand it now. I've found my higher power now, and I'm happy with that. But at the time, I couldn't connect to it, and I felt at a loss for that. But I do think that, now, like you say, there is more of an understanding around mental health and everything, but I didn't have it. I hadn't
mm,
a bloody clue when I went in. So these words that are thrown at you made no sense to me, which I'd
yeah,
imagine they do to most
100%.
people. Like most
Yeah,
people would go in going, what the hell is this? And that is overwhelming. So if someone's telling you to do like a specific approach, I think that would be a wrong approach. You know what I mean? Because you don't know what's going to work for someone, or you don't know what they'll understand. And I think that's the point. Like, it's like baby steps, you know, treat me like I'm literally a child and I need to be put on the right path.
Yeah, I think that is changing. And that's I think with mental health change. I think a lot has changed. And what we have to be very mindful of, we have to really, and I always say this, like your recovery is your recovery, my recovery is my recovery. What works for you might necessarily work for me. What works for me might necessarily work for you. And we have to be very mindful of that, as I'm sure you were the same, Barry, and maybe down the line, Claire, you'll see this yourself. But when you're in sitting in front of someone and they know that you've gone through or you know a lot about the subject, it's nearly like we have to resist the temptation to try fix. And my recovery is very much something I work on in different ways than someone who goes to a GA meet, or someone who might go to Smart Recovery, or someone who might go to um whatever other elements of recovery that gets us very important, I suppose, to.
The smart
Yeah.
recovery is a good one though. And I would say it's something I use with clients. It's something I use with myself. But it would be nice to see it a bit more mainstream. I don't know. Maybe it is used by other organizations I'm just not aware of.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely room for growth there. But again, I don't think, just for clarity's sake, I don't think any of us are knocking GA or A or
No,
NA. We're
Not at
no,
just
all.
talking about, because
no.
like, you touched on it there a little bit. Like I remember, I think it was just after I qualified as a counselor, so maybe 2011, 2012, the first dual diagnosis, the first in Ireland, was in Waterford that year. And one of the speakers was talking about the fact that in addiction services, the vast majority of people, like the vast, you're talking kind of in the 70, 80% of people have a coexisting mental health issue. And what happened then, and what still happens now, is you go to mental health services and they go, "Oh no, but you've got an addiction. You need to get your addiction sorted out. Go over to the addiction services." And then in some cases, they'd go to the addiction services and go, then they would be told, "Well, no, you have a mental health issue and you need to
Mm.
get that sorted." And this sort of bouncing around, and people are getting caught between stools. Whereas, you can have a gambling problem, whatever name you want to put on it, and anxiety, and depression, or bipolar, or like that ADHD. I'm seeing a lot with clients, and I'm actually doing a course myself for ADHD, kind of a psychoeducation program through University College Dublin at the moment, because I suspect that I may have ADHD. It would certainly make sense of a lot of my behaviors throughout my life if I did, but not diagnosed yet. But all these things can coexist and co-occur. And if you go, well, here's a program, and it definitely works for all people all the time, and telling people, if you work X program, whatever the program might be, then it'll work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, that's because you're not working the program. Now, I have problems with that. I have some problems with
We won't we
that.
won't go into we won't go down rabbit hole. But just I'll have to jump off now in a second. But it just
Yeah.
that probably leads me to my favorite quote from any of the episodes. That was actually from yourself, Claire, when you said, like, even at the latter stages of getting recovery, you were saying you even felt you were failing at recovery. And it's good to see sitting on here many years later, and you're very much not failing in your recovery now. So I think that was one of my favorite quotes from any of the episodes. Because again, if we think we should be doing it a certain way, we feel we could fail in that certain way. But people are tuning in, or people are picking up the phone to whatever services they're offering, counseling or GA or Smart or whatever else out there. Once you're trying to make that change, then you can't be failing, and that's where I may jump off, because I have to get ready for another Zoom at 5. As again, I totally forgot about this until I texted you. I think it was yesterday, probably before the match. Is this podcast going on today? So apologies for having to jump off a little bit early. So
All right. Well, listen, thanks for coming on, Tony. And
no problem.
congratulations to Liverpool Football Club and all their
Yes.
amazing supporters, and commiserations to all the people like me who follow
Stick out
them.
your tongue. There's probably a big black line down the middle of it there. See you later.
Take it
Pleasure,
easy.
Tony. See you
All
See
later.
you,
right, bye bye.
Tony. And thanks everyone who's been tuning in for the last 5 years. And we hope you got something out of today's episode. And we hope that you get something out of all the episodes. And if you didn't get something out of today's one, well, there's 77 other ones that we recorded before this, and there's probably one in there that will do something for you. And if you're listening to this, and if you've got any feedback you want to give us, you can send it in anonymously. Any communications with us are 100% confidential. If you wanted to send it into the helpline email, info@problemgambling.ie. We'd love to hear from you. Anything that you've gotten from the podcast over the last 5 years, we'd love to know about it in strict confidence. Okay, we'll knock it on the head there. Thanks, Claire, and we'll do it all again sometime soon. Bye.
All right.